A few months back, I actually had a video in regards to race baiting, especially after Beyonce's rant at Radio Raheem. To this day, that speech, and it went on for ages. It got a bit too personal when I decided that I wouldn't upload it at that time because I just went off on a tangent, and it was more about me rather than the state and how it affected boxing as a whole, and I wanted to keep it related to the sport as such. But over the past few weeks or so, obviously, it's still there. You know, every once in a while, it raises its ugly head, and I thought, you know what, maybe this is the time that I do come back round to that subject and just give my sort of overview on it. Um, so let me give a little bit of understanding from sort of where I'm coming from, and then obviously that gives you a better understanding as to why I made the points that I'm going to raise. Um, Obviously, I'm black, I'm dark skinned from London in England, and race for me doesn't have much of a prevalence as it does in the United States, just based on media, what I read, whether that's YouTube or other media outlets, the comic section. It seems to be much more of a thing. Um, Whereas I think, obviously, I've not been everywhere in England, but London is very diverse, and I don't think it plays so much of a. I don't think it's so much of a thing, especially sports wise. Are there racist people in London? Absolutely, of course there is. If people lived on the moon, there'll be racist people on the moon. But how much stock it holds in terms of who people support, I believe, I don't think it has much of a prevalence. Um, in comparison to United States. I mean, I've been to America. What? Been to New York 5 times, and I've been to Florida twice. So that's 7 times I've been to United States in the last, I don't know, 15 years or so. So I've had interactions. I've left my country. I've been to other countries, obviously, but I've left my country. I've been to the United States. And did I get a vibe racism wise? No, not really. I thought everybody was overly friendly, actually, black or white. Maybe obviously it's probably the places that I visited. New York is very London-like. It's very cosmopolitan, very mixed, and I know Florida's in the south, but then I went to Disneyland and Miami, so maybe there's not the right places for me to go to get a feeling of how race plays a part there. But nevertheless, I've been to the United States. I've met the people in their natural habitat. So ultimately, my feelings are about racists as a whole, and I'll get to it in terms of boxing. But in terms of racists, I'm probably going to be a bit. I'm probably coming from the left field here, but I actually like my racists to be really racist. Now, hear me out. I like the idea of the Ku Klux Klan. I like the idea of neo Nazis. I like the idea of skinheads. And when I say idea, not the ideology, but I like the fact that they're front and center in terms of what they think about you as a race. Those vocal and visible racists, I'm okay with them. Why, you ask? Well, because now I can see them for what they are. If you're coming in your Ku Klux Klan robes, or you got your skinhead with your Nazi swastika tats, and um, you know, I now know what you're about. We don't need to say a word to each other. I know what you're about. So there's no fake in it. The races that I don't like are the races who are the quiet racists and the background racists. Your boss who is giving you the appearance that he's helping you, but deep down he don't like you because you're whatever race. Black people can be racist, of course, 100%. Asians can be racist, whites can be racist, everyone can be racist. But I don't like the racists who will look you in the face, say all the things that you want to hear. You'll go away thinking, you know what, that person's a really nice person. They're actually trying to help me. But actually, they're plotting your downfall based on the fact that they don't like you from a racial or cultural point. And those are the races that I can't stand, that are all smiley in your face, but actually they have a disdain for you. Give me a loudmouth skinhead any day of the week. That guy can't articulate anyway, and in most arguments, I'll beat him hands down. They're only brave in numbers, and I can deal with that. That's fine. They're absolutely allowed to. That's more of a generational thing. If that's how they were raised, for the most part, there's nothing really much we can do about it. In London, it's very different. Um, Obviously, years back, I'm an '80s baby, so I'm only going off what I've heard and what I've seen and the feelings that I've had. But in years back, in the '60s and the '70s, obviously football or soccer, but it's called football really. You know, race was a big issue. They're throwing bananas on the pitch at black players. You know, they would want to fight you in the stands based on that. But as time went on, people started to understand that actually, it's this person plays for your team, and they're potentially scoring the winning goal or helping your team achieve good things. And hopefully, well, clearly over time, those feelings and resentments sort of went on the back burner or reduced. Now there will still be people there who harbour those racist thoughts, but the difference is that those thoughts are not welcomed on a larger scale. You couldn't go into a football stand and call someone a black monkey and no one around say anything. Someone's gonna say something. Where it could be to that person's face, where they'll be like, "That's unacceptable," or they'll go to a steward and that person will end up being ejected. It's not. If you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it in your very small circle of friends or 3 or 4 people, and you're gonna be covert about it, because as a whole, we deem it as unacceptable. And I look at boxing and I think to myself, when Deontay came here and he was chatting rubbish about how the British fans are ultimately racist, especially to the fact that he's dark skinned. And I'm thinking about all of the boxers who we've celebrated over the years have the vast majority have been dark skinned guys. You know, Frank Bruno, Nigel Benn, Eubank. Maybe not so much Eubank because he's considered a bit of a tosser, but definitely Bruno and definitely Ben were adored by the British public. Majority of their fan base were actually white for the most part. Um, you go watch their fights and look in the audience, and the vast majority of their fans are white. Yes, we've had mixed race or light skinned guys. David Haye being probably one of the most recent ones. Again, he's a Marmite type of character in terms of whether you like him or not. But it never really came down to race as such. It's more about his mouth and how he comes across, and that's how it should be. It shouldn't really come down to race. I like Joshua because I identify with Joshua more based on the fact that of his upbringing and where he's come from. That resonates with me more. But I don't look at him and think, okay, cool, because he's black, I must support him. Because there's plenty of black fighters that I don't like, British or American or wherever they're from. And there's plenty of white fighters or Asian fighters who I rate, like, and respect because of their skill. If you've got the skills and you can do it in the ring, fantastic. There's fighters who I dislike as an individual, but I rate as a fighter. Like, for instance, I don't like Carl Froch, like attitude wise, and the fact that he's always miserable and he's always sniping at someone. But in the ring, although I don't think he was technically a great fighter, I liked his resilience and his toughness, and the fact that I've never seen him give up. He always gives 100, and that I can respect, even though I don't really like him as an individual, and even more so now that he's a pundit and he doesn't have the boxing skills for me to say, well, at least I can bear him because he's a decent boxer. He doesn't have that anymore, but I still respect his decision and the things that he says, even though I don't particularly like him. So I think here in the UK, there's a lot less. Race is not necessarily a crutch in terms of who you support. I think naturally people gravitate to who they identify with more, whether that's for economic reasons. You grew up in poverty or you grew up in a rich household. If you see that in someone, I think you're drawn to that. Same way if women will be more drawn to a female in the same sport just because obviously they identify with the fact that they're a female who enjoys that sport and they see someone that represents them. And that's how I think sort of race sort of plays a part here in the UK. In America, it seems a little bit different, especially with those cunts at the LDBC, where it don't matter about skill now. It just comes down to what color they are, as to whether or not they like them or not. And that for me is wrong, and it's very dangerous in that way, because you're only going to have a divide, because then we're not talking about boxing skills, because you can't debate with these people, because that person who you're trying to debate or argue that is better than their guy, if he's the wrong color, then it's a non conversation, because they've already made up their mind based on his color, and you're not going to change his color. That's never going to change. So the prevalence of race here is not as significant, and how it should be. It really comes down to skill, charisma, and just being able to relate to that person. And if that person happens to be black, fine, he's black. If that guy happens to be white, fine, he's white. When it comes to boxing, it should purely be about skill base and nothing else. So it is disappointing that we're still 2019, and we're still debating who's good or bad based on the color of their skin, as opposed to their skill and what they bring to the ring, and whether or not that person's going to improve as a fighter or not. But Deontay is a contradiction of himself. He came to Belfast. Ireland is predominantly white in comparison to England, and he said that he felt a lot of love. While he was here, he didn't have anything to say. It's only till he got back to Alabama did he start shooting off his mouth again, and that's a familiar theme with him. When he's there, or in the midst of whatever it is that he has a problem with, you never really hear him ever say anything. It's only till he gets back to the safety of Alabama or America do you ever hear him shoot off his mouth again. So, race-wise, here in the UK, there's a lot of people, again, in the comment section who talk about England or the UK who have never even left their state, yet they seem to be able to have an opinion based on watching Downton Abbey or Game of Thrones or whatever it is that you think England is. It's not that. We don't have that much of an emphasis on the colour of someone. Again, are there racists? Yep, there's racism everywhere. Everywhere. But is the emphasis on race held as highly as it is in the United States? Here in the UK, absolutely not. You're not gonna feel that when if you come here as a fighter. And again, that's how it should be. So it is disappointing that we're still this far along in the sport and we're still having these sort of debates. But I thought I'll just give a sort of insight of how I feel, race plays a part here in the UK in regards to boxing itself.